Our next speaker is Gary Wilson. Gary's time is 5 to 7 minutes, and he's speaking out of the CC manual, Persuade with Power. After Gary finishes his speech, that will be his last speech in this CC manual. So he will have, how many CC awards? Too many to count. His evaluator is Sam McKinsey with the speech title, please welcome Gary Wilson. Gary, what should leaders focus on?
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. That indeed is an intriguing question. And ladies and gentlemen, before I finish, I hope you know and realise the answer. As I tell you, a cautionary tale about public relations. Now, everyone says public relations is a good thing. Who agrees that public relations is good for an organisation? Hands up, right. And it is good in moderation. But what say the public relations activity is very, very successful and really promotes the organisation tremendously, far more than you'd expect. Would that be good? No. No, it would not. And that's the cautionary tale I'll tell you about, is why public relations was so detrimental to Toastmasters in Australia. Back a few issues ago at the Parramatta, you might have read about my OAM award. And if you look there at my biography, you would have seen that one of the things I did was to start the Australia Day Public Speaking Contest in New South Wales, and then to move on to be the national coordinator for the Australia Day Public Speaking Contest. So what was the Australia Day Public Speaking Contest? It was an idea that came out of Melbourne in 1978, that Toastmasters should get involved with the National Australia Day Committee to promote a national public speaking contest. And it was in two sections: youth, aged 15 to 18 as of Australia Day, and adults 18 and over. And the idea was contests to be held around Australia and finish with a national final on Australia Day. It was a great concept. And the district governor of the day came to me and said to me, opportunity knocks for you. I want you to start this contest up in New South Wales. So I did. And we started small, and then went big. Now, the Australia Day Public Speaking Contest had 3 objectives. First was to stimulate interest and pride in Australia. The second was to increase community involvement with Australia Day itself. And the third was to promote the Toastmasters organisation to the wider general public. First question to be asked is this: did the contest succeed in those objectives? And the answer was a resounding yes. It was tremendously successful in those 3 objectives. Each year we would publish a brochure like this, the Australia Day Public Speaking Contest, which has set out the conditions of the contest, how to enter it, 5 to 7 minute speeches on one of half a dozen nominated subjects. You pick the subject such as the first settlers, a memorable Australian, the Australian spirit, one nation, one future, and so forth. Each year, half a dozen subjects were nominated for people to speak on. This brochure was widely distributed, speaking organisations, anyone interested at all, through radio, schools, and on the back, What is Toastmasters was there to tell people about Toastmasters. So a lot of publicity was going this way. The Australia Day Committee that publicises Australia Day and puts out a magazine 6 times a year would feature us, and in the Australia Day magazine you had things like the Australia Day Public Speaking Contest, a write-up of our state final in Sydney we'd just held, and then the winning speech, the Australian Spirit, reproduced in full by Leela Girat, name actually, a name that some older members might remember, a local person here, was a state winner. And so her speech went all around Australia through the magazine. Great publicity. The contest was also the only form of public relations or activity that Toastmasters has ever done, to my knowledge, which got mainstream newspaper coverage. So for example, after the national final I ran, 27th of January 1981, gets a photo in the Daily Telegraph, here are the finalists, here's an article about the contest. It was big enough that we could get a reporter and a photographer to come and cover and get mainstream coverage. So, Australia Public Speaking Contest, a great success. The second question we should ask is this: was it good for Toastmasters? And the answer was no. And the more successful the contest was, the worse it was for Toastmasters. Until eventually, Toastmasters International stepped in and said, you guys down in Australia have to stop it. Especially when the Canadians started the Canada Public Speaking Contest and aping what we were doing. And they really rang alarm bells. Why was this? It's because the contest became a logistical nightmare. Not a nightmare, a logistical problem. The bigger and more successful it was, the more heats we ran. And so, for example, we would run a heat in Parramatta here, the Hills District Club would run a heat during the Orange Blossom Festival, heats would be run in country towns, and these winners then had to be put through in a whole series of semi-finals before we finally reached the final. And we had the final, for 6 years we had the final on the Saturday night of the semi-annual conference, our state final. But we had to organise sponsorship, we had to organise judges, because one of the things we did was to ensure that at least half the judges of every contest were not Toastmasters. There's lots of people from Rostrum, Penguin, Toastmasters and other organisations supporting us. And lots of effort. It became a big thing. Everyone got wrapped up in this contest. And our district officers were involved to the point that they were not focusing on what their jobs were. You see, in every organisation, you have a vision of what you're trying to do. And then you need to have a mission of what you want to do. And you set goals and strategies to achieve your mission. The mission of our district is to expand the network of clubs and also to train and develop leaders for the organisation. Well, they weren't doing that when they were running the Australia Public Speaking Contest. There came a case of the tail, being the tail of Australia Public Speaking Contest, waving the dog, which was our district. We lost focus. So the message I want to give to you, which we learned out of this, is one of the leadership lessons I've learned in Toastmasters, is this: that as leaders, you have to always focus on your mission. Have a vision of where your organisation wants to go, what you're doing, but focus on your mission. And don't let side issues, whether they be public relations, whether they be social activities in this Toastmasters Club, for example, get so large and so busy that you lose track of what you're there for. So my message for you, very much, as leaders, always focus on your mission. Focus on your mission.
Thank you, Gary. That certainly does sound like it did get bigger than Ben heard.